Thank you, Graham. And I think the key thing here is for a lot of the TV industry, this is revolutionary. It's no longer a broadcast. It's actually a narrowcast served out of the broadcast stream, or perhaps, Graham, increasingly from the set-top box itself, which is a whole new dimension and a whole new opportunity to get tighter into that targeting issue. And I'd reference back to what Mike Campbell of Ubiquity said earlier this morning. You know, that's what it's all about. It's about making sure the right people still see the right ad at the right time, but to have the right engagement levels. Now, our next speaker, I know, will be engaging, and as always, will be very forthright in his thoughts. It's an absolute pleasure to ask Brian to come up and join us. And Brian, you have 7 minutes.
Hi there. So I'm the General Manager for Emerging Technologies at Iponweb, and for the purposes of this, focusing really on how do traditional media markets get transformed into digital trading markets, and what are some of the challenges that we've seen, and where do we see things going. So, you know, if you look at a high level, a lot of people equate programmatic or addressable campaigns with RTB types of traffic in digital, which has some similarities, but it's a very different environment, as some of the things have been discussed, different technically, different operationally, different legal requirements, and it's a very different mindset. And it's very much like the early days of RTB, where you had the appeal of RTB, for those of you who aren't familiar, was really to monetize unsold inventory. You start getting a little bit of data, you go after performance campaigns, you get things of understanding, and it's an opportunity for a lot of people to kind of create value where there was no value before. TV content, and I'm being very broad in the sense it doesn't have to be broadcast, but kind of stuff seen in a TV quality environment, is about having a different level of control and to kind of move towards not just do I have an understanding and do I get some data out of the opportunities, but do the participants in the market, which includes the consumer, do they get a better experience overall? And how do you plan and invest and go forward against that? So it's much more around a sense of audience. It also transcends, and it's kind of been touched on indirectly in some of the previous talks, about looking at it from a household level rather than a device level. So we often forget that most solutions that have been put out into market across any advertising have been not either a super low level, and there's attempts to roll it up to an individual, or they're very high level and looking at a market view. So this starts to meet in the middle. So right now it's very fragmented. There's a lot of different solutions in the market. There's a lot of people trying a lot of interesting things. It's an interesting time for addressable TV because there are different approaches and people trying to solve for different problems. I think one of the things that's particularly interesting at this point is you have a recognition in traditional marketing, in digital marketing, that what traditional TV brought was scale and reach, very easy to buy, very well understood, a very protected environment, and something that would be, it's not exactly, let's say, fraud-free, but everybody knows what the rules of engagement are. And that's completely not the case in digital, right? It's the Wild West still. There's a lot of different people, and there's a lot of different solutions. There's standards bodies that are moving forward. There's individual efforts of people trying to do things, and those are starting to directionally converge, but not to the level of a solution. So there's limitations. There's lack of standardization, which really gets into the scale issue, right? I mean, Sky has some amazing things, but advertisers in different markets have to deal with different vendors, right? Sky is not present in every market, so how do you adapt? Do you go to their data lake? Hopefully not. Do you have to do separate integration? And it starts to lead to market conditions that force consolidation onto a few different platforms. That creates problems in terms of experience, scale, reach, and kind of market balance. That not just, you know, I've heard many agencies talk about, you know, they'd like to do all of this, but they're not going to do these integrations with 50 different partners. So market fragmentation, which if you look at kind of the broader reach of addressable TV, it touches, you know, certainly things like measurement, but you don't even know what you're integrating against because the audience is driving the change. These changes are coming from changes in consumer behavior, changes in attention. Attention hasn't increased. You only have so many hours a day to look at media or be exposed to media, though it may increase slightly versus what it was a few years ago. The number of devices, the number of channels, and I think we'll talk about it more later, those approaches of everybody trying to centralize are basically doomed to fail, right? You can't bring all of this into one point. So we can talk about that maybe. So getting to that, and kind of one thing that's left out of this, out of the picture at least, is where's the consumer in this picture, right? So there has to be a balance of interest for everyone going out there. If you look at the experience and kind of early complaints from some of the broadcasters, particularly in the US, around companies like Netflix, effectively it was a very different consumer experience. And now you see efforts by companies like Disney to kind of take control over their own customer delivery in defense of their own brand, right? So it's their users watching their content. They want to make sure they have a quality experience that resonates in a way that controls, but it's got to balance the needs of the advertisers. It has to be responsive to the people who are providing data, and it has to be a quality experience for the consumer. So this is technically very hard to do at scale. It's very hard to get the reach, and it's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of different opportunities that we're seeing coming through. So one of the ways that we think about this is instead of trading individuals and trying to build device graphs, sure, certain people will do that, but if you look at trading at a more abstract level, how do we raise the conversation to the point that you're transacting on an audience, right? And some people it'll be individuals, some people it'll be devices, other people's it'll be markets, but that there has to be a way of rationalizing what you're doing rather than everybody having to recreate the wheel every single time that they're trying to do something. So that's where we see some near-term opportunities. Part of this is around creative control. Some of the stuff that was touched on from Ritz's, which is if you have a more managed environment, in terms of the advertisers want to have creative separation, they don't want to be next to their competitors, all of these things that TV has addressed. Again, you need to do this at scale. You also have to do things like frequency. You want to do creative sequencing, things that have been capable in different media. How do you unify that? So how do you optimize each channel, and how do you expose that back to the market in a way that's consistent and makes sense? How do you plan for this over the future? You can buy spot, you can buy a few impressions, but media companies and media owners need to have an investment against what they're producing for the content. This is expensive quality content. These are expensive environments to operate. So everybody has to have some sense of where should I make my investments? How do we all benefit from this, and how does it create a rising currency, if you will? And then finally, how do you unify this across the different properties? What are the levels of abstraction? No one standard is going to, I don't think in any foreseeable future, we can't wait for there to be a common everything, right? You can't have a common currency, can't have a common identifier. So how do you interact with the various participants in this that allow you to trade and create value for everyone? So, thanks.